Hey,
Hey.
how are you?
I'm feeling okay. I was watching that countdown go, and I literally just had a bit of maybe slightly of an emotional like an emotional second. And I think I know it's because this is the last time I'll be joining everybody in this capacity. After this session, I'll be jumping into the audience seat and I'll be watching the rest of this incredible gathering. So I just want to say thank you for joining us and also send my love to yourself, Mitzi, to Daniel and to Anna, who have been really amazing to hold this space with. And also, you might not see them, but we have an incredible team in Poland who have been really cool pulling this together. So thank you to them as well.
Amazing. In case this is the first time you guys are joining Zain and I am Mitzi from the Philippines. I am a climate justice activist with Fridays for Future International.
And for the final time, malo honi. My name is Zain. I'm from the Pacific, and I'm actually from Tonga, and I'm with the Pacific Climate Warriors.
Oh, we're gonna miss you, Zain. I think this might be like one of my last sessions with everyone also. And really the gathering has just been so amazing. We are doing this 200 sessions across the globe. Right now we're interpreting in 9 languages. This has never happened before, and it's new and it's cool, and there are tech glitches sometimes, but we're so excited to have you guys here. Um, and it's so exciting. And if you guys have missed a few of the panels before, if you guys have missed some of the workshop, that's fine. All of the plenary sessions, the panels, the cultural sessions will be uploaded on the justrecoverygathering.org website. And some of the workshop sessions, depending on the organizers and the people who attended them, will also be recorded and put up on the website after. So if you guys missed anything that you really enjoyed, you can always look back on it after, and we can keep learning and keep going together even after the 3 days are done.
So I guess welcome to the final day of the Global Just Recovery Gathering, and we're really grateful that you could join us for our first cultural session. We're excited to present our artists who will be traveling all over the world through circus, music, poetry, and much more. We will start with acting for Climate Montreal in the east coast of Canada with the performance Adapting to the Tide. Then we will navigate from the North Canada shores to the Caribbean Sea, where Cuban singer and composer Demi Arocena, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, Cuba, will sing for us with her charismatic and powerful voice. At the end of this session, we will jump to Peru with the rhythm of Nova Lima, who we hope you dance to the bend of the Afro-Peruvian percussion and dub, funk, electronica, global beats, and house music. That sounds really cool. Let's get into that and hope you enjoy.
Yemaya ngoro bindila yago Yemaya Olubashikini Yemaya chikini Awoyo shikini Shikini Omolode Omodidio Eyo lade Omolode Omodidio Eyo lade Oluba 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 Alambo danse Oluba la 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 Alambo danse Y yo shung Y ya yema ya Y ya ochung Y ya ochung Y ya yema ya Y ya yema ya le 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 la 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 Y ya yema ya Oluba chikindi Oluba A la modanse Shit 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 chikindi Yemaya Ashaba Ay, yo chumbi madre, yo te quiero cantar. Ay, yo chumbi madre, yo te quiero cantar. De corazón, madre mía, te vengo a pedir. Bendición, bendición para el planeta Tierra, para todo el que vive aquí. Yeah, 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 Yemaya, 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 ngoro pindila yego, Yemaya, Yemaya, voy a construir mi casa y ponerme a descansar. Voy a construir mi casa y ponerme a descansar. San Antonio, mi casa se está cayendo. San Antonio, domingo, día de fiesta. Me voy, me voy, venga. Me voy, me voy. Me voy, me voy. Rico, me voy, me voy. Venga. Gózalo. Vaya. Rico, rico. Vaya. San Antonio, mi casa se está cayendo. San Antonio, domingo, día de fiesta. San Antonio, mi casa se está cayendo. San Antonio, domingo, día de fiesta. ¡Venga! Gózalo, gózalo, mami. Dímelo, dímelo. Me voy, me voy. 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 Rico.
Sabroso.
San Antonio.
Yes, that was amazing.
That's so cool. That was really great. I was just sat here dancing in my seat, and I think I'm just totally in awe of how many different ways when it comes to art and music and culture that you can tell the story of the climate crisis and invoke all the feelings from despair to joy that we feel when we're within this movement. That's so great. So thank you to the artists, Acting for Climate Montreal, Deme Aracena, and Nova Lima for those incredible contributions to the Global Just Recovery Gathering.
Okay, so I know we're running over a little bit, but we do have another special set of videos delivered from C40 who have been a partner. So C40 is organizing the mayors of cities around the globe to fight for a livable planet. They had some messages that they wanted to share with us, so please join us in hearing some special recorded messages. Some are aimed at 350, but they mean everyone in the movement. No one person or organization does this work without each other. Let's see them.
I'm doing one of those freeze ones, the technical glitch freeze. It's the internet method.
I am so sorry, guys. So I am looking at the wrong script. You know, this is what happens sometimes when you have a massive Excel sheet with all the panels happening all at the same time, you know? It happens. Let me take all that back. So right now we're going to have an amazing panel, Solutions became a magic word to face the climate crisis, but we cannot be distracted by false solutions, allowing the climate crisis to continue to escalate, disproportionately affecting those who have contributed the least to the real problem. In this next panel, we are going to hear about climate solutions, how climate solutions can only succeed with justice at the heart. So this will be moderated by the amazing Alex Lanferna. So Alex, please take it away.
Nicolò si incontro mondiale per la ripresa
Global Just Recovery Gathering.
It's a real pleasure and privilege to be with you today for this panel on climate solutions can only succeed with justice at the heart. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our three wonderful speakers on this panel. We are privileged to be joined by Nimo Bassi, who's director of the ecological think tank, Home of Mother Earth Foundation. He's an architect, a poet, a writer. He's got an incredible CV, having done so much wonderful work in the environmental space, and has written a number of really wonderful books. His book, To Cook a Continent, was one of the books that really inspired myself to get in the climate space. So it's a real privilege to have Nimo here, and personally just really nice to have one of my own heroes to speak on climate justice. So thank you, Nimo. One of our other wonderful guests is Suanur Rahman, and he is the founder of YouthNet for Climate Justice. It's a voluntary youth network for youth, which aims to raise awareness and tackle the effects of climate change in Bangladesh. Suanur is doing incredible work for a young age, and a lot of his work started after Cyclone Sidr in Bangladesh, and has been doing incredible work to raise awareness, to really ensure that the solutions that we are pushing forward are real meaningful solutions and not false promises. So it's a real pleasure to have you with us. And last but certainly not least is Teresa Anderson, who is Climate Policy Coordinator of ActionAid International. She leads ActionAid's climate policy work on land, food, and agriculture, and coordinates the Climate Action Network's working group on agriculture. And ActionAid has been doing really incredible work to put justice at the core of climate. So it's really great to have you with us, Teresa, and really great to have you all here. So to kick off, I wanted to start with a question about your work and its relation to justice. So what in a nutshell does justice mean to you, and how is it relevant in your work?
Thanks so much, Alex. And thank you so much to 350 for holding this really exciting gathering at this really critical time. It's an absolute honor to be here with all of you on the panel and everybody out there being part of this collective moment. So thanks for the question and the framing of this session. I think it's super timely. And coming to your question about what climate justice means to me, to ActionAid, I think I can answer that on two levels. First of all, when it comes to the geopolitics, let's say, of climate negotiations, which is a world in which I work and probably many of the audience work in too. For us, that means that the polluting countries, the corporations, the individuals that have done the most to cause the climate problem, and who have in fact benefited from a century of industrialization, many centuries of colonialism and exploitation, have to take responsibility for fixing this climate problem. And that means doing the fair share of action to solve the climate crisis. And it means that the countries and communities who've done least to cause the climate problem, who have the least capacity, who are on the front lines of the climate crisis, the communities that are suffering the worst impacts of droughts, of cyclones, of floods, rising sea levels, these countries and communities are supported to cope with the impacts and are given financial support, to transition to greener pathways, and aren't bullied into carrying an unfair burden to fix a problem that they didn't cause. So that point about who's responsible for causing the climate crisis, who needs to do the most to step up to fix it, that question goes to the core of the fight in the UN climate negotiations and is in fact responsible for a lot of the deadlock that we see around the world. But that is basically why we call for climate justice and equity and what it means in that geopolitical context. But when it comes to what solutions look like on the ground, we also need to make sure that social justice is at the heart of climate action. And it's about going beyond making climate calculations based on carbon or greenhouse gases alone, or even just counting the impact on trees and polar bears, which, as much as we love them, is really about understanding what climate impacts and climate policies mean for people. So, for example, when we put in place climate policies, climate programs, projects, it means having an understanding of what those policies are doing, how they're going to affect people on the ground. So does it affect people's livelihoods and jobs? Does it affect people's food security, their access to land, whether people are whether projects are gender responsive, or do they exclude or possibly even harm women disproportionately? Do these policies actually address inequalities, or do they actually exacerbate them? Unfortunately, there are a lot of policies and solutions put on the table that do not ask those questions, and that's why it's really important to put social justice at the heart of climate action. And of course, it's always really important to, when you consider those people involved, do they get a say in how those policies get rolled out? Do they get to shape a better future for themselves? Do they get the support they need to make that leap? Or do they get to say no if it's going to harm them? So these are the questions that help us make sure climate action is based on climate justice.
So I am a youth activist and I work for climate justice, and we believe we cannot achieve climate justice without gender justice and wider social justice. So climate solution without justice are doomed to fail. False climate solution like carbon capture, clean coal technologies, transitioning to natural gas will keep communities engulfed in energy poverty. If we truly want climate solution to work for impacted communities, then we have to make a just transition to renewable energy. Government have to make young people part of the solution and involve them in the decision-making process. It is after all the young people who will be leaders tomorrow, and we are not fighting for future, also fighting for present. We mobilize young people, we are advocating with the decision maker, policy maker, and we are holding national governments and global communities to promise, to fulfill their promise, which were not met. And they are doing their business as usual with empty words. So we cannot be distracted by false solution, allowing the climate crisis to continue the escalate, disapparently affecting those who have contributed the least to the real problem. We are running out of time and we must act now. For me and my people in Bangladesh, climate crisis is already a reality. It's not prediction. The impact of climate crisis are already getting worse, with cyclone gaining more strength, record-breaking floods, and rising sea levels. By 2050, half of the Bangladesh will be underwater due to climate crisis. Every day, people from the coastal region are forced to displace to the cities in search of livelihood, as their farmland and houses get destroyed due to climate impacts. So rich countries should stop bankrolling the fossil fuel industry at home and abroad, work with climate vulnerable nations like Bangladesh, and support renewable energy development through finance and technology transfer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Therese and Sohano. You've both used the hammer to hit the nail on the head on this issue. Really, the work that I do with my colleagues is completely based on justice, whether it's about climate or whether about food or even about sharing knowledge. Everything must be on the platform of justice. And this means to us that when it comes to climate change, climate action, we have to strive to go back to the fundamentals. Where did the problem come from? Who is responsible for the problem? When we lay our fingers on where the origin of the problem is, then we can begin to talk of the solution. Now, if the solution is to be carried out by the victims, by those who have suffered the impacts, and without creating the problem, contributing to the problem in the first instance, that means there's no justice. And so I'm sure we're going to hear more about this as this conversation continues. The multilateral system itself tried to recognize this fact by bringing in the common but differentiated responsibilities clause in the original, well, still limping along even in the Paris Agreement. So basically, to me, climate justice requires in our work that we have to decolonize climate action. We go to the roots of the crisis, of the multiple crises. You can't look at climate change in one silo. If you just look at climate change as counting the carbon in the atmosphere, and that's the beginning and the end of it, then of course you miss the whole lot of what is going on. It's a social issue, it's an economic issue, it's even a political issue. We have to look at the entire ambit and all the injustices involved in what has generated the problem. And it also means to us overturning the current global division of labor, where one sector of the world, especially the global south, is just to provide the raw materials to be trashed so as to extract things, and then to dump also the waste on the same region, and then expect the region also to carry out the bulk of the climate action. It means to us that we have to recognize justice, not just in terms of humans, but also the rights of Mother Earth. Mother Earth has a right to maintain her cycles, and whatever we do, the degradation we do, the destruction humans do that affects, basically disrupts nature, is also unjust. Justice, not just for, as I said, human beings, but for all beings and for Mother Earth itself. And one of the key ways that I really get offended about this thing is when people are forced into carbon slavery. In other words, you see nature, you see a tree as a carbon sink, and somebody's forced to watch after that tree, even negating everything else, even a sense of dignity and a sense of life. So it's a whole lot of things packed in this notion of justice. It's about life, it's about respect, and about dignity.
Thank you for that. These answers are really helpful, and I think it's helping us to unpack that, the climate issue and the questions of justice are so multifaceted, and they connect across the very economic systems and at the heart of the extractive sort of capitalist economic system that is driving a lot of the crisis. And I think what we're seeing as well is that the solutions need to be perhaps radical, and there's the sort of the Latin root of radical, which means you're looking at the cause of it, the roots of the issue, and realizing the sort of systemic nature of it, rather than just the symptoms and thinking you can deal with each one of the symptoms. And I think it's dealing with those symptoms and isolation that often leads to maybe more false solutions, as we've kind of mentioned the term false solutions in some of these discussions. So I wanted to maybe dive into, in your experience from your work, what is a false solution? Can you give us an example that illustrates it? And why is it not really a solution? Why would it be considered false versus a meaningful solution and not a just one?
Okay, I like that. I thought I had a long stretch to wait and gather my thoughts, and there you are, boom. Yes, there are actually many examples, and from my experience, also building up on what I just said. A lot of the work I do on hunger politics, about food issues, as well as on fossil politics, which means extraction of fossil fuels, which is the beginning point, more or less, the beginning of the pipeline for pumping carbon into the atmosphere. And so look at those two broad areas. I see examples of false solution that directly really blocks real action. One is the whole concept of climate smart agriculture. Maybe Teresa will speak more about this, but maybe not. Okay, but my take on this, I'm not going to the technicalities of it. My take on this is that when people speak about climate smart, actually, rightly or wrongly, the idea is about genetically engineered crops engineered in laboratories to be drought tolerant, or to be able to withstand some other harsh conditions. I mean, when this comes up, people actually generally say, "Oh, well, that's a great idea." People believe that technology can solve all kinds of problems, but a lot of false solutions are based on technology being turned into a fetish, a kind of religion, and really for a crop to be truly climate smart, it has to be, I believe, it has to be culture smart. It has to be ecologically smart. It has to be indigenous to the territory in which it's cultivated. It's not a thing you manufacture from the laboratory. Life is not a product of the laboratory, of a confined building, laboratory in the building. It's the laboratory of life. That's where life comes from. And so we need to see things that nature's already given us that are resilient, and they promote those things, because the sustainable action is when people live in a particular place see how what they have can help them overcome the challenges of global warming. If they have to depend on imported ideas or imported items, there's no sustainability. And there's no, except it goes back to another colonial arrangement where people have to depend on a cargo coming from the seaport. So the challenge I also see is that building on that notion that genetically engineered crops are the best to be climate resilient, means that in Africa, for example, where countries are being arm twisted to develop very permitting biosafety laws that don't consider the safety of the environment, the safety of the people, but just a notion that somebody can produce something that tackles the problem. And we see a lot of resistance to actually carrying out the real climate action. And the real climate action, we all know, is to keep the fossils in the ground. It doesn't require technology, it doesn't require equipment, it doesn't require having massive conferences for over 20 years. Simple, keep the fossils in the ground. And we've seen examples of this being done. For example, in Ogoniland, fossils have been kept in the ground since 1993, when the people say we don't want any more extraction in our territory. We've seen efforts in Ecuador, although that did at Yasuni ITT, that didn't work out eventually. But we've also seen it in places like Costa Rica, in Belize about offshore extraction. We've seen the fishers in Lofoten, in Norway, continuously fighting against extraction or even exploration, which is destructive. And so climate action, again, to me, the false solutions are things that ignore the beginning of the pipeline. Things that any solution that talks only about carbon molecules, to me, is completely false solution. And that's what we see in a lot of what we do.
So Ninumio rightly mentioned about the ZMMO and also the climate smart. So climate smart is a very vague term, climate smart agriculture or climate smart solution. So we should more focus on sustainability or like climate resilient infrastructure or the agriculture production. So another one is the policy making. Or Bangladesh is the first country who take a action plan, Bangladesh climate change country action plan, and we have many policies. It's called National Adaptation Plan, NAP, and many policies for Bangladesh. And also Bangladesh is a pioneer of Delta Plan. It's a 2100. So people's participation, women's participation, or young people's participation in the policy making, policy execution, climate intervention is very low. So without the community people's participation, the consultant-led planning, it's sometimes turned to false solution, and then it's create more problem with this inaccurate solution. Like Delta Plan totally focus on the Netherlands, and it's totally led by Netherlands expert. So Netherlands is a Delta country, Bangladesh is another Delta country. So if we copy that Netherlands plan, so we cannot fix out with a sustainable solution. So in water management and also food security, so everywhere we should promote the indigenous knowledge, local knowledge, local solution. So without local knowledge, local solution, local experience, we will create more problem with the false climate solution. And Bangladesh established a climate change trust fund. But this trust fund is not funding in real cause or climate resilient infrastructure. They are funding in the as usual development project. They are funding on park. They are funding on bus stand. But it's not the solution. We need more support on the drinking water crisis in Bangladesh or how farmers can adapt. But their funding is wrong way. So this development project and Bangladesh is taking many mega projects, but they are doing some environmental assessment, but it's not perfectly. So through many development mega projects, it's create more problem in the climate crisis area.
I think I'll talk about one specific example right now about of a false solution. And that is the big flurry that we're seeing at the moment of net zero climate targets that are being announced by governments and corporations. Many of you will have heard government announcements like from the UK, EU, Canada, France, New Zealand, Sweden. Lots of them are announcing net zero climate targets, which people are assuming is a great sign and putting us on track for meeting the Paris Agreement commitments. And at the same time, you're seeing all sorts of corporations, Shell, BP, Nestle, Qantas, Microsoft, the cement industry, the dairy industry, even the steel industry announcing somehow that they plan to get to net zero emissions by 2050. This is being celebrated, particularly by the UK government as host of the upcoming COP26, as a great sign that we're on track to save the planet. It sounds great. And one might assume that the more announcements that we get, the better we are for the climate. But unfortunately, that is not the case, because net zero targets might sound good, but actually they are mostly being used to delay urgent action, often until 2050, which is still 30 years away. Greenwash, business as usual. And most of the time, many of these targets actually rely on imaginary technologies that don't really even exist, or that they're in very, very initial stage and will probably never, ever work at scale. And a lot of the time, these targets also assume that they would have to have massive tree plantations. And I'm talking a massive that would drive vast land grabs in the global south. And so that means that when we see these net zero targets being announced, we have to scrutinize them before we accept them at face value. In particular, we have to watch out for the net part of the net zero targets. You know, is it really about getting down to zero, or is it the net, the massive net, that's the greenwash? How big is that net? Unfortunately, instead of really transforming and cutting emissions radically in the way that we know we need corporations and governments to do, most of these net zero targets really rely heavily on assuming that basically you can carry on polluting, releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and that at some point in the future, there will be a solution to suck that carbon out the air again at some point. So most of these net zero targets tend to bet on a combination of carbon offsetting with tree plantations, or assuming that negative emissions technologies like bioenergy with carbon capture and storage are going to do the bulk of sucking the carbon out the air after it's been emitted. But, you know, these technologies like carbon capture and storage, it's ridiculous to rely on these for your target, because it will likely never work at scale. Even though billions of dollars have been spent on this technology over decades, they still cannot make it work at scale. And if they rely on bioenergy from tree plantations to sort of try to suck even more carbon out the air to make that CCS even more effective, they'll drive massive land grabs in the global south. So by having these targets based on BECCS, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, we're damned if it does work, because it'll drive land grabs, and also damned if it doesn't work, because that means we failed our climate targets. So it's really ridiculous to have these targets based on this imaginary technology and all this land. We do not want to legitimize climate colonialism through our climate strategies. There is just not enough land on the planet to meet all of the combined corporate and government offsetting targets. And so many of these targets are based on 2050 anyway, which is just far too little too late. And really, this is about this huge net components of these targets that disguise a lack of transformative action to reduce greenhouse gases. And so, like, there are various estimates that suggest that if we don't radically transform to stop releasing greenhouse gases at source, we could end up needing to plant trees on up to half the land that the world area currently uses to grow crops, or maybe even more, maybe even much more. So, so these are basically really weak targets being announced, most of them. And it means that we'll likely see widespread failure to cut emissions and achieve these targets and the action that's needed. And we'll also see that the vulnerable communities in the global south who've done the least to cause the climate problem and who already face the worst impacts are going to be pushed off their land. And just as we saw with the biofuel land grab over the last decade or more, but potentially orders of magnitude even bigger. So we'll see, displacement, hunger, loss of livelihoods, deforestation, gendered impacts, and huge injustice. Once again, the global south carrying the burden to fix a problem that they didn't cause. And if we want to protect land for food security, for ecosystems, we basically need to see real action to cut emissions, real radical, as you said, Alex, profound transformation, particularly in sectors like energy, industry, agriculture, and for climate targets to be based on real radical urgent transformation.
Thank you for those really powerful answers. And it seems a lot of, at the heart of them, is problematic reliance on technology that's not sensitive to justice. Speaking of problematic technology, Surnur, sorry we lost you for a little while there, but glad you're back with us. And it does seem like this focus on technology will save us has become a really prominent element in this. I think the poster boy for that is Bill Gates and his new book. And he talks about like all these far-flung technologies that, will save us. We need to invest in R&D and so on. Meanwhile, he ignores a lot of the solutions that we have right now. Could you maybe give examples from your experience of what a real solution looks like and why justice is key to it? And I think here I'll just allow anybody to jump in. So feel free if anybody's feeling sort of the urge and has a good sense of what they'd like to talk about in terms of what is a real solution and why is justice key to it. I
can jump in then, Nimo. Oh, Solano, you're back. But if you want a few minutes, Nimo, to collect your thoughts, I'll go first. Yeah, about just to comment on Bill Gates. No, he's in favor of geoengineering, which would be trying to, mad technologies to try to bounce sunlight off the edge of the atmosphere and potentially radically transform planetary weather systems. Like, seriously, billionaires will do anything to avoid system change. But to talk about real solutions for justice, what a just recovery or a just solution would look like. Let's think about what we want to bring about. What do targets need to look like? What do plans need to look like to contrast with weak net zero targets? What would action need to look like to take emissions down to real zero to have a chance of meeting the Paris Agreement goal of limiting warming to 1.5? We would need to, basically minimize the total amount of carbon dioxide we put into the atmosphere now. Urgently, we need to stop polluting now and make the radical transformation now. We need to restructure our energy, agriculture, housing, transport, construction, industrial, economic systems. It's going to be huge, the transformation we need to create. And we need to create that pressure and demand together, because otherwise it's not going to happen. In order to bring global emissions down to as close to zero as possible, and then simply use our remaining precious but limited biodiverse ecosystems to absorb whatever emissions that we can't figure out how to stop. And we need, government and corporate targets to not be about 2050. They need to be about 2025 and 2030, ambitious targets in the near term that do not rely on offsets or dangerous negative emission technologies. And to do all of this in a way that's just for communities, we should apply principles of just transition. And I'll explain a little bit what this can look like in food systems, because we did a briefing a while back called Principles for Just Transition in Agriculture, but I think it can apply broadly to other sectors too. So when it comes to agriculture, the IPCC made it clear that, we need to shift from industrialized agribusiness to agroecological or organic models of agriculture, and from factory farming of livestock to producing and consuming less and better meat. And that's because synthetic nitrogen fertilizers produced by agribusiness require a lot of emissions to produce, and when they're added to the soil, they kill all the lovely soil biota, and they also cause the carbon in the soil to degrade back into carbon dioxide. Whereas when you use agroecology or organic agriculture, you're using natural materials like compost and manure to add to the soil, increase fertility and carbon in the soil, and store the carbon, and also make crops more resilient, because the water can also store better, which makes it more resilient to droughts and floods. And when it comes to factory farming livestock, that's a huge problem, because it uses so much of the world's cropland and forest land just to produce feed for these animals, and as well as for grazing. And instead, we need to produce and consume less and better meat, and also grow more vegetable proteins and pulses. So we would find it easier to feed the world using our world's cropland if we were growing food for humans instead of for livestock in factory farms. But we need to recognize that as we talk about just transition in the energy sector, farming communities also need just transitions to better modes of farming or even alternative economic opportunities. There is a lot of resistance to climate action among farming communities, and that's because farming is already a very difficult way of life. Farmers are squeezed, they're often forced to get big or get out, often by the industrial model of agriculture, and they can be worried that top-down simplistic climate policies are just going to add extra burdens to livelihoods that are already very precarious. So they may feel demonized, they can often feel quite defensive. So that's why we developed these principles for just transition in agriculture. And the key takeaway is that it's not only about what you transition to, but how that transition is done. It's about the process as well as the outcome. So it's about creating the space for farming communities or communities such as those in the energy sector to participate in shaping the transformation so that it works for them as well as for nature and the climate, and that it addresses the underlying inequalities in the system. A just transition has to address inequality and not exacerbate it, and that communities themselves get the support they need to make that leap, whether it's training or social protection or new routes to market, new livelihood economic models set up, rather than just being told, yep, we're basically expecting you, Mr. or Mrs. Farmer, to make the change and solve the problem without giving you any support. But if done well, just transition can help communities shift from opposing climate action to being advocates, because it creates the space for them to shape a more secure and more just future.
I would just like to start by saying that the just transition or just recovery we're talking about cannot be it would not be just if we're moving from one destructive system to another. There are some things we love so much. I mean, we love clean energy, green from renewable energy. But if the extraction of materials to construct that new technology is destructive to Mother Earth, destroying environments and their sources of livelihood, then of course there's something wrong. There can be unjust renewable energy. But the caution is just that we need to be careful about what where we are moving and how we are moving. It's just a natural precaution or cautionary comment, because we've seen in some places where very much needed green energy provision is done at the detriment of local communities whose lands are grabbed and who are also at the fringes of the energy supply and don't benefit from it whatsoever. But having said that, I believe one of the key changes that we need to see, both at the multilateral level, is an immediate end to voluntary emissions reductions. Nations should not be left to just cut emissions as they please, because even though the efforts to make them more ambitious and so on, it's natural that geopolitical arrangements and the political equations in the world, the fact that might is still quite powerful in relation between nations, the polluters would continue to avoid cutting emissions at source. Or at best, they would do what Teresa talked about now, what were about net zero suggestions. Even the most polluting companies are now declaring that by 2050 there will be net zero and so on. And what does this mean? It doesn't mean they're not going to stop emitting, not going to stop polluting. They're going to have an imaginary solution that supposedly absorbs the equivalent of the carbon they are producing, as though nature works on the basis of arithmetic or calculus. But nature is much more complicated than that. So I believe this kind of just solution we want to see must be devoid of carbon offsetting. That's a summary. We shouldn't see trees as carbon stocks. Trees are much more useful ecosystems than just carbon stocks. Otherwise, we might as well use humans. We have a lot of carbon in our body, so we might as well use human populations as carbon sinks. I don't know why you shouldn't. The argument must be reasonable. If you want to use trees as carbon sinks, extend to other things, including human beings as carbon sinks, and that would actually be stupid. We also see the issue of oceans being, in terms of geoengineering, people planning that they could enhance carbon absorption by ocean through ocean fertilization or through other means. But what that could very much even increase the problems with the ocean, which will, including ocean increasing acidification, which would impact on the aquatic ecosystem and really create more problems for both humans and other beings, both in the ocean and outside of the ocean. Of course, that could also mean massive sea grabs. There's a lot of talk about the blue economy at the moment, ocean economy as being the new black gold or whatever. They give you some nice name that makes you lulled to sleep, whereas it's actually a signal that, look, colonization is coming from another level. We've got a lot of land grabbing, now it's going to be sea grabbing, and of course geoengineering, the terrestrial, the ones about solar radiation management by putting putting panels in the atmosphere, mirrors in the atmosphere, and so on and so forth, also can be said to constitute sky grabs. We have to just fight against all this grabbing. The real just solution may not be very convenient for us, but we have to be ready to inconvenience ourselves, cut our consumption, manufacture more durable groups. You don't need new models of everything every year, and then others are going obsolete and we're looking for a way to dump the waste. Some of these wastes are not easy to manage, and some of the plastics being dumped in the ocean, some being used in even domestic products, may last several lifetimes before if they ever biodegrade or ever degrade at all. And so if we're moving we have to move in a way that protects not just the environment at this moment, but also what future generations will have to deal with. And so there are simple solutions, I believe, simple solutions to the complex climate problem. But I guess when the solutions are so simple, people avoid to take note of them. For example, we always said agriculture is one of the most polluting sectors. We hear high percentage, but we don't ask the question, what kind of agriculture? It's also fossil fuel-driven agriculture. Mechanical is about colonial plantation agriculture that is feeding feeding machines or feeding animals, and not really the food that is produced mostly by small-scale farmers. I do know that farming close to nature actually cools the planet. So let's call out the climate criminals and not blame, make a blanket blame on sectors or people who are engaging in real climate action. I believe what we need to do, what needs to be done is actually for humans to be a bit more humble and listen to nature, to accept that we don't understand the entire complex situation in which we found ourselves, and then begin to look at how to rebuild things and how to repair what is broken, how to replace the system, and then get back to caring for one another, caring for other beings, caring for our ecosystems, and knowing that we have ecosystem both outside our bodies and within our bodies. In other words, again, I repeat, we need to listen to nature, listen to Mother Earth, respect the right of nature to be herself. And then, of course, in all this, there are some things that we may not be able to avoid, but of course, you have to make sure that they're within sustainable limit. And in all that, labor must not be sacrificed on the order of profit.
Thank you, everybody, for these incredible discussions. I think it's really shown how justice truly is at the heart of solving our climate crisis and our broader planetary emergency, indeed. I thought I would end with a quote from Dr. Cornel West, who says that never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. And I think thinking about what it means to fight for justice and climate justice, we recognize that it's informed by love of our communities, love of our planets, of our ecosystems, and that it's that love that ignites us and makes us fight for real solutions, not false solutions, ones that truly will solve the crisis and look at the core of what drives and the roots of these issues. And so I hope those that have joined us for this session have got to see what justice means a little bit more. And it's something that we need to dive deeper into in our work all the time, and never forget to look at where justice comes in and why we need to fight so hard to ensure that it is there in our climate action. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and many, many thanks to our wonderful panelists for this really rich and lively discussion around justice. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Incontro mondiale per la ripresa.
Global Just Recovery Gathering.
I love that quote. Justice is what love looks like in public. Definitely.
There was so much truth in that session. Another one that I really loved was that humans need to be a bit more humble and listen to nature, to Mother Earth, respect Mother Nature's right to be herself. It's such an important and beautiful truth.
I saw you just nodding and like smiling when Timo said that. It's so true. Like, there's so much truth in that panel, and it's something that we need to always remember, that climate justice activism, that's what we need. Not just numbers and molecules, but heart, people, soul.
And also, I think there was a really good lesson in there around understanding and education, especially at a grassroots level, on things like false solutions. If we don't demystify these things for people just at a grassroots, at a community level, then governments and corporations will continue to use these false solutions to distract people from what the real injustices are that we need to fix. So I'm really grateful for that conversation that we just had.
And that's actually a great segue to what we need to talk about next, where we need to tell world leaders that we don't like these false solutions. We're not taking these empty promises. And since this coming Earth Day on April 22 and 23, US President Joe Biden is inviting 40 world leaders to his climate summit. And from our summit with voices across the globe, we want them to hear our demands for a real just recovery for all. And years of delay and denial have only made the climate crisis worse. It's time to listen to the science and stop funding fossil fuels and invest in a real just transition, leaving no one behind. So we're asking everyone to go take a second to go to 350.org/summit and sign a petition. As the politicals gather, we'll be delivering that petition. So go into that website right now and share it on social media. Tell your friends about this petition and get your friends to share it and sign it too.
Sign away.
Yes. Okay. I feel like that's enough time for everyone to have signed something. Zane, do you want to tell us about what we have up next?
So I guess now we're heading into some workshops. As always, a number of folks have been asking about recording. So during the gathering, the panels are going to be recorded. Workshops are recorded if the facilitators choose and if the participants agree. So we're respecting the spaces being created. We'll post a way to access to all the recordings over at justrecoverygathering.org after the event is over. We have a few minutes before these workshops kick in, so we encourage everybody to have a stretch with your body, look away from the screen, find a minute in between sessions to take care of yourself and do all the things you need to in order to show up to these spaces. Workshops happen in Zoom rooms, and to find a link, you'll click on sessions. I don't know which side it is, left. I think it's left. It's on one of those sides. There are quite a number, I think, of 90-minute workshops that are about to start. So select the workshop you want to enter. If you arrive a few minutes early, you'll see a countdown clock. That gives our tech crew some time to set up. And then once the workshop is open, you'll see a Zoom button so you can go directly into the Zoom workshop. I guess that's
this. This is our last time with Zayn, guys. Everyone send him some love and rest and good energy. You've done so much these past few days, and not just in the plenary sessions, but also in the workshops. And I am so excited to look back at some of them after the gathering is done, and to keep sharing and to keep learning from you guys.
Yeah, it's been an incredible last couple of days, and I'm so grateful to have shared this space, in most part with you, Mitty, because I've been a really big fan of yours for a while now. So I did start the beginning part fangirling, but I appreciate all the love and support, and also just encourage everybody to meet as many people as you can over this next day, because that's what this gathering is about. So we'll see you all when we see you.
Bye. That was too cool.
So good.
It's so cool because I can't imagine ice, like it being cold enough for ice to not melt right away. I guess because, Philippines, tropical country, very
I
different.
can confirm it does get that cold.
It is so cool, but that's so amazing. Like ice instruments from the voice of Arctic Ice and the mesmerizing instruments of Terje Isungset. That is so cool. I'm so happy we got to see that.
Yeah, so great.
And I think we actually have someone that's special today that wasn't originally on the schedule, but one of the people who has been able to make this session so fun. And since it is our last day, it would be nice to see him up here.
Don't know who you could possibly mean.
Oh, I think. Oh.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Oh man, this is my only opportunity to get to co-host with Mitzi. So I'm super excited that we get a little bit of overlap. You've been killing it. People are loving the Mitzi, Zane, Mitzi, Anna shows.
I'm gonna miss Zane. We're done with him. I wish we had like one with all four of us.
Yeah, I'm sad about that too.
There's a demand.
Yeah.
If the people organize, they can make that happen.
That's true.
Get on chat right now. Make that happen, people. Pressure us. All targets are movable.
And definitely, like, there are so many different ways to move targets, and one of them is actually also through music and art. Anna, do you want to tell us who we have up next?
Yeah, sure. I'm so excited that we've got another one of these cultural sessions before you go back into more workshops. So we've got 3 different pieces, is that the right thing to say, for you to enjoy. One by Natalia Castrillo, one by Meimu Yogeda, and one by Shata QS. And they're all artists who compose and are inspired by the wisdom and power of nature. So in the session, you're going to hear dialogue between Natalia's harp and the Finnish forest. It's going to be so nice. Also, apparently some calming melodies of the water in the lake. You'll hear the spring singing with Meimu's piece Melting, which is a song dedicated to the possibility of transformation in spring. And then we're going to end with a 15-minute journey with Shata QS, who will take us on a journey through the nature in Poland. So yeah, I'm super excited to see what we're gonna see.
I'm so excited for this. How do you feel, Daniel?
Super excited.
Let's do this.
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Czym jest wszystko, co otacza Ciebie? Gdzie jest źródło tego, co jest? Gdzie doświadczasz wszystko? Na zewnątrz czy wewnątrz siebie? Gdzie mnie widzisz? Czy wewnątrz siebie? Gdzie mnie widzisz teraz? Czy widzisz mnie w sobie? Czy widzisz mnie w sobie? Gdzie mnie słyszysz? Gdzie mnie słyszysz? Gdzie mnie słyszysz teraz? Czy słyszysz mnie w sobie? Czy słyszysz mnie w sobie? Gdzie mnie widzisz? Gdzie mnie widzisz? Gdzie mnie widzisz teraz? Czy widzisz mnie w sobie? Czy widzisz mnie w sobie? Gdzie mnie słyszysz? Gdzie mnie słyszysz? Gdzie mnie słyszysz teraz? Czy słyszysz mnie w sobie? Czy słyszysz mnie w sobie? Kim jestem i czym jest ja? Jak długo błądzić mam w zapomnieniu? W zapomnieniu. Na zewnątrz nie ma nas. Światło i przestrzeń nas decyduje o istnieniu, o naszym istnieniu. Kim jestem i czym jest ja? Jak długo błądzić mam w zapomnieniu? W zapomnieniu. Na zewnątrz nie ma nas. Światło i przestrzeń nas decyduje o istnieniu, o naszym istnieniu. Gdzie mnie widzisz? Gdzie mnie widzisz? Gdzie mnie widzisz teraz? Czy widzisz mnie w sobie? Czy widzisz mnie w sobie? Gdzie mnie słyszysz? Gdzie mnie słyszysz? Gdzie mnie słyszysz teraz? Czy słyszysz mnie w sobie? Czy słyszysz mnie w sobie? Gdzie mnie widzisz? Gdzie mnie widzisz? Gdzie mnie widzisz teraz? Czy widzisz mnie w sobie? Czy widzisz mnie w sobie? Gdzie mnie słyszysz? Gdzie mnie słyszysz? Gdzie mnie słyszysz teraz? Czy słyszysz mnie w sobie? Czy słyszysz mnie w sobie?
That was so great. I personally am feeling quite sad because I've been trapped in my bedroom for quite some time and I'm really missing big, expansive, open spaces. So my heart was a bit overwhelmed by all the snow and mountains there. So yeah, looking forward to being able to get back into nature for sure. And nice to have a little glimpse of it there.
That's so true. And I loved how like they all flowed into each other, like really like water in nature, as you know, we mentioned earlier, the calming melodies of water. That was so nice because I always listen to like sounds of the rain or the ocean or water when I'm stressed. So like this was a nice calming thing.
Yeah, for sure. And we've also been getting some nice feedback in the chat. I think we've said a few times this gathering isn't just pulled together by 350 or by Fridays for Future. There's loads of organisations involved. So really nice to see a shout out from Tamara from both ends, who was really enjoying the music there. And I know another one of the organisations that we do loads of work with is C40. And I think that they've helped with the next contribution. So Mitzi, do you want to tell us about them?
Yeah, we do have a special set of videos delivered from C40, who have been a partner. And C40 is organizing the mayor of cities around the globe to fight for a livable planet. They had some messages that they wanted to share with us. So please join us in hearing some specially recorded messages. Some are aimed at 350, but they mean everyone in the movement. No one person or organization does this work without each other, just as Anna mentioned earlier. So yeah, let's see those special messages.
Thank you to 350.org for organizing this incredible gathering. Everyone, 350.org has been a really important partner to New York City in our fight against climate change. We have taken inspiration from your ideas, from the organizing, the activism that you have made happen, and it's really been an example of activists and thinkers and visionaries helping government to be better. We've accepted that willingly, happily, and the gathering you've had in these days with experts, with activists, with artists, with people on the front line of the global fight against climate change. This is how we make change. Now, everyone, let's call this what it is. This is a transformative moment. This is one of those once-in-a-generation moments. Maybe only once in every several generations do you get a chance like this where the stars align and people are thinking differently. They're open to major changes, reforms, a new way of doing things. The pandemic did such painful harm to all of us, but it also showed the world that we could do things differently, that we could summon a powerful collective response. The vaccines were created that way. The vaccines were a victory for science, a victory for humanity, a victory for the notion that government could actually lead and do good. In this moment, we can do so much more, and we can deal with the true existential threat with some of those same lessons, some of the same energy that we brought to the fight against COVID. We need to do it even better to fight the climate crisis. Now, we in New York City decided years ago not only to do things that were different and bold and broke the status quo, but that we needed to lead by example. We believe in the Green New Deal. We've put it into action here. We believe in divesting from fossil fuels. We did it to the tune of billions in dollars, and we took that money and we put it immediately into investments in renewable energy. And it works. This is the thing. We're the financial capital of the world, New York City, right? If there was ever a place where we were going to get the critique, oh, you can't divest, it won't be fiscally sound, we proved it's a good investment to get away from fossil fuels because fossil fuels should be stranded in the ground. They do not make sense by any rational measure. So those old rules didn't work. If you want to do what's smart for the planet, get away from fossil fuels. If you want to do what's smart for your retirees and the people in your community, get away from fossil fuels. Any way you slice it, the old status quo was a lie. And so we're doing things differently now. And we recognize that those investments in renewable energy are going to be what save us and create the jobs we need. We're going farther now. We're saying we have to cut the cord with fossil fuel. We have to literally ban new fossil fuel connections. That's what we're doing now in New York City. We're saying it's so dangerous to stay addicted to fossil fuels, we've got to make it impossible. What we're saying in New York City is we've got to do wholly different things if we want to attract people to better ways of living and thinking. We're putting electric vehicle charging stations all over New York City. We're making a public investment so people can make a personal decision to turn to electric vehicles. We're saying to the real estate community, yeah, it's going to cost some money to retrofit buildings, but it's now the law. We passed the strongest law in the world requiring building retrofits because it's a matter of survival. So what we keep learning is aim higher. What we keep learning is that we can do things we didn't even realize we could do, and that is the way forward for all of us. So I want to thank all of you for what you're doing, for having a conversation that actually gets to the heart of the matter, how we save the earth, how we make sure there is a future for generations ahead, how we do things differently. Your energy, your activism will light the way forward. And we got to bring everyone into this. So the last thing I would say is convincing people that the era of fossil fuels must end. Some people get it right now, some people will get it later. And we got to show respect for those who don't necessarily see it our way yet. We got to bring them to the realization this is for all of us. And I find that that's a conversation worth having. Showing we can do things differently, showing people that it can be a response that works for everyone, that there don't have to be losers in this equation. Yeah, maybe some of the big multinational corporations are the losers, but not the people, not working people. That a Green New Deal is a better way for jobs, for the quality of our environment, for our security and safety, for a world we can live in. If we can express that with our whole hearts, we're going to win more and more people over. We're going to make this a new reality. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for what you're doing. And I know every day we're getting closer to the goal of a real Green New Deal for all.
The C40 Mayor's Agenda for a Green and Just Recovery outlines bold steps to deliver an equitable and sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Led by C40 mayors around the globe, the specific measures outlined in the agenda focus on creating green jobs, investing in crucial public services, protecting mass transit, supporting essential workers, and giving public spaces back to people and nature. Mayors that make up the task force are deeply concerned that only 3 to 5% of an estimated 12 to 15 trillion US dollars in international COVID-19 stimulus is currently committed to green initiatives. By propping up old and polluting economies, the mayors warn a dirty recovery will accelerate climate breakdown, endanger public health, cost lives, and sacrifice jobs. By ignoring the opportunity to make rapid green stimulus investments, most national governments and global institutions are likely leading us towards catastrophic climate change. Planning for the economic recovery from COVID-19 requires stimulus and recovery funds to be channeled towards investments in mass transit, walking and cycling infrastructure, and clean energy, based on the principles of the Global Green New Deal. Our youth are our future. It's important to give young people a platform to share their concerns, their ideas, and their hopes for the cities they live in, work, and study. It is my hope that our youth are empowered to find solutions to the climate crisis and understand the science behind climate change. The climate crisis demands new kinds of partnerships and ambitious ideas. This is why C40 Cities has launched the Global Youth and Mayors Forum to unite the voices and efforts of some of the world's most powerful city leaders and visionary youth leaders in the climate movement. This meeting comes at a critical juncture when the lives and future of young people are threatened, not just by climate change, but also by the ongoing pandemic and the resulting economic depression and rising unemployment. Over the next year, the forum will facilitate conversations and collaborative climate action between C40 mayors and youth climate leaders that help accelerate the implementation of a global Green New Deal, including by better engaging young people in climate action.
Amazing. I love what they said about the fossil fuel industry being a thing of the past and something that we should just stop forgetting. And Daniel was asking me backstage if I was going to be in the movement for another 40 years. I hope so, but I also hope that climate activists in 40 or 50 years have less work to do because we've improved more as a society, you know, like hopefully that's what happens.
Yeah, I hope that too, definitely. That's it for this cycle, everyone. Thank you so much for those of you that have been with us this whole time. As we've said, we've pulled this event together with loads and loads of partners. So we are going to go into a 2-hour break now, but that would be a great time to check out the partnership space and have a look at some of the amazing organizations and groups that have helped pull this gathering together, if you haven't already, and also head to the network lounge and yeah, connect with each other. As we've said, there's been so many amazing things we've been able to do by having this event online in terms of who we've been able to reach, both as speakers but also as participants and guests. But we are kind of missing that, you know, casual conversation you'd have with someone over a cup of tea, if you're me, or over whatever you'd be drinking. So yeah, you use the networking space to like create those conversations for yourselves.
And this is actually going to be my last session here with you guys as an MC. The next ones I will be, like Zain, just part of the audience. So I have one last request as your MC. I want you guys to go over to 350.org/gathering-survey and tell us about your time with us. If you loved it, if you hated it, if you had questions, do you think we should do this again? Because we need that feedback in order to do this again, because this is the first time we're doing this at this scale and it's amazing. So it would be really amazing to hear your thoughts on it. And after the 2-hour break, there is a special youth panel, which I've also been helping organize.
Say, you're not going to be in the audience. That is not true. You're one of the stars of the next panel. So let's not downgrade our expectations of what we're going to do next.
I'm going to be in the background, you know, making sure everything is going smoothly. But I hope you guys are there in the youth panel because, and, you know, all the other panels. We still have so much in store. And we also get to see everything after. All the previous sessions will be recorded and will be on the justrecoverygathering.org website. So you can all see it there and keep learning and keep growing and just keep fighting for climate justice. This is what we're doing.
But for now, like, check in with your body, have a break, have a power nap, go outside, look at the sky, do something that makes you feel like a full human. And we'll see you back here. It'll be me and Daniel, so it's going to be chaos. But we can't wait to see you again in a couple of hours. Have a great rest.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.